You're sitting alone in a concrete room. No windows. One flickering bulb overhead. The door opens. A man walks in, places a file on the table, and stares at you. He doesn't yell, doesn't threaten. He just waits. That silence? That's where true terror begins. This is the art of Adlai Mestre's Interrogation, a psychological masterpiece designed to unravel minds without raising a fist. Think about every interrogation scene you've ever seen in a movie or heard about in real life. What comes to mind? Probably shouting, bright lights, aggressive questions fired like bullets, threats, leaning in close, trying to physically dominate the person in the chair. It's all noise and pressure, a storm designed to overwhelm, to crack someone open through sheer force and chaos. That's the standard playbook, the expected script. Adlai Mestre threw that playbook out the window, completely. His interrogation stands apart because it operates in the exact opposite direction. Forget the storm. Think about the eerie calm before the storm. The heavy, suffocating stillness where you can hear your own heartbeat pounding in your ears. That's where Mestre worked. His power didn't come from volume. It didn't come from speed or aggression. His power came from profound, calculated stillness, from silence, from pauses that weren't just breaks in conversation, but deliberate, stretching voids, chasms of quiet that felt like they went on for eternity. Imagine sitting there. The door clicks shut. The room is bare. Maybe it's cold. And then nothing. Just this man, watching you, not yelling, not even really moving much, just looking, waiting. His silence isn't empty. It's heavy. It presses down on you. It fills the room until it feels like you can't breathe. Every second that ticks by in that quiet isn't just time passing. It's a weight settling onto your shoulders, onto your chest, your own mind. In that vacuum, starts working overtime, racing, jumping to conclusions, filling the silence with its own worst fears, its own guilt, its own paranoia. Why isn't he talking? What does he know? What's he waiting for? Is he reading my mind? Can he see how nervous I am? The pressure doesn't come from him. It comes from inside you. He just creates the perfect, silent space for it to grow. This is the haunting genius of it. Mestre didn't need force. He didn't need to invade your space or scream accusations. He used the deafening weight of silence itself as his primary tool. It was a psychological scalpel, not a hammer. While others tried to smash through a wall, Mestre simply waited, patiently, for the wall to crumble from within. He understood something fundamental about human vulnerability. We are wired to fill silence. We crave resolution. We need to explain, to justify, to make noise just to break the unbearable tension. And in that desperate need to fill the void, we expose ourselves, our raw nerves, our tells, our weaknesses. Our lies start to itch under the skin, desperate to get out, just to make the silence stop. He exposed vulnerability not by attacking, but by retreating into absolute stillness, by making his silence louder than any shout. The person being interrogated isn't wrestling with an angry opponent. They're wrestling with the echoing chambers of their own conscience, amplified by that crushing quiet. It's terrifyingly intimate. There's nowhere to hide, not even behind your own thoughts, because the silence makes every thought feel deafening. Every shift in your chair, every swallow, every nervous glance becomes a scream in that quiet room. This approach is so counterintuitive, so deeply unsettling, that it bypasses the usual defenses people put up against aggression. You can brace yourself for yelling. You can try to shut down against invasive questions. But how do you brace yourself against nothing? How do you fight silence? You can't. It seeps in. It dismantles you piece by piece. Not with violence, but with an unbearable, patient quiet. It makes the absence of sound the most powerful presence in the room. That's why Adlai Mestre's method isn't just a historical footnote or a creepy story. It's studied, seriously studied. Psychologists dissect it to understand the extreme effects of sensory deprivation and the manipulation of social expectation. They see it as a masterclass in how silence triggers anxiety, erodes self-control, and amplifies internal guilt far more effectively than external threats. Investigators and intelligence professionals analyze it to learn about non-coercive interrogation techniques, understanding how patience and psychological pressure can yield results where brute force often fails. It's a chilling case study, recognized worldwide, precisely because it reveals a profound and unsettling truth. Sometimes, the most effective way to make someone talk is to say nothing at all. So, who Who was this man? Who was Adlai Mestre? That's where things get interesting and deliberately murky. Because Adlai Mestre wasn't a detective in a rumpled trench coat. He wasn't a police officer flashing a badge. He wasn't part of any official law enforcement structure that we can clearly pin down. His power didn't come from authority granted by the state. It came from something far more unsettling, a profound, almost unnatural understanding of how people break. He was, quite simply, a master manipulator of truth, a sculptor of silence, an architect of psychological pressure operating entirely in the shadows. Think about that for a second. His identity itself feels purposefully elusive. There are few clear photographs, conflicting accounts of where he came from. Even the details of his life outside that interrogation room are hazy, obscured, almost like he applied his own technique to his biography, creating a void for others to fill with speculation. Was he formally trained? Was he self-taught through grim experience? Did he emerge fully formed, a phantom specializing in the quiet dismantling of human resolve? We don't get neat answers. That ambiguity isn't a flaw in the record. It feels like part of the design, part of the mystique, part of the chilling effectiveness. He wasn't a known entity you could prepare for. He was a shadow given form only when the door clicked shut behind you. His entire legacy, the thing that echoes through training rooms and psychology seminars decades later, rests almost entirely on one thing: that single, terrifyingly effective interrogation we've been discussing. That's his monument. Not a building, not a book, but a method captured in a few hours of oppressive silence. It's a chilling case study, frozen in time, demonstrating with brutal clarity how patience, weaponized, can be infinitely more destructive than any fist or threat. It showed the world that breaking someone doesn't require noise. It requires the agonizing, controlled application of quiet. Waiting isn't passive. In Mestre's hands, it became the most aggressive act imaginable. How did he develop this? How did he become this figure? While the specifics are lost to those shadows, we can piece together the likely foundations. Everything points to Mestre possessing an almost obsessive, deep background in human behavior. He didn't just observe people. He dissected them. He understood the intricate clockwork of fear, guilt, and anxiety that ticks inside every person. He knew the tells, the micro-expressions, the involuntary shifts, the way sweat beads not just from heat, but from the internal pressure cooker of a concealed lie. He understood the fundamental human aversion to silence, the desperate need to fill it, to explain, to relieve the unbearable tension it creates. He grasped how isolation, even in a room with another person, amplifies every internal doubt until it becomes deafening. This wasn't casual knowledge. This was the knowledge of a surgeon, or perhaps a predator. He studied the mechanisms of the human mind under stress with the cold precision of someone examining a complex machine. He learned its weaknesses, its pressure points, its inevitable failure modes. He saw how the mind, starved of external input, turns inward and begins to devour itself. How guilt, when left alone in the quiet, grows teeth. How paranoia flourishes in the absence of sound. This deep, unsettling expertise in the raw mechanics of human psychology wasn't academic for him. It was operational. It was the bedrock of his technique. And that's why his interrogation feels so profoundly different from the standard, aggressive approach. It wasn't a shouting match. It wasn't a battle of wills fought with words. Watching it unfold, or rather, not unfold in any conventional way, feels like witnessing psychological surgery. Cold, precise, detached, utterly deliberate. Every pause wasn't an absence. It was an incision. Every silent observation wasn't just looking. It was probing. Every minute that stretched out in that suffocating quiet wasn't wasted time. It was the careful application of a specific kind of pressure, designed to cause a very specific kind of internal collapse. He wasn't questioning a suspect. He was performing an operation on their psyche, layer by excruciating layer, using silence as his scalpel and stillness as his anesthetic. He didn't force confessions out. He created the precise psychological conditions where confession felt like the only possible relief, the only escape from the crushing internal weight his silence amplified. The person in the chair wasn't defeated by Mestre. They were defeated by their own mind, meticulously cornered and exposed by his patient. Silent orchestration. He made them believe confessing was their idea, their desperate solution, born entirely from the unbearable environment he had engineered through nothing more than presence and quiet. That's the terrifying elegance of it. That's the mark of a true master manipulator. He operated in the shadows, his true nature obscured, leaving behind only this one chilling demonstration of his art. A shadow who understood light comes from the fire within people burning itself out, and all he had to do was remove the fuel of noise and distraction. And wait, patiently, silently, like a spider feeling the faintest tremor on a web woven entirely from quiet dread. Mestre's method wasn't random chaos. It was a meticulously crafted psychological assault, executed in near-total silence. It unfolded in 4 distinct, devastating stages. Let's break them down. A. Stage 1. The void the moment you walked into that room with Adlai Mestre. The rules vanished. Forget the usual script. Forget state your name. Do you know why you're here? None of that. His first move was to create absolute emptiness. Utter void. He wouldn't introduce himself. Wouldn't explain a thing. He'd simply be there, sitting across from you, maybe looking at a file, maybe just staring. Not a word, not even a greeting, just presence. And then he'd wait. Minutes would crawl by. 5 minutes. 10. Just the sound of your own breathing. Maybe a flickering light. The uncomfortable scrape of a chair. Nothing from him. Complete. Crushing silence. This wasn't just quiet. This was a vacuum deliberately created. And human brains despise a vacuum. We crave information. Context. Something to latch onto. When faced with pure, unexplained silence and stillness, our minds panic. They scramble. They start generating their own noise, worst-case scenarios, spiraling fears, amplified guilt. Why is he doing this? What does he know? Does he already have proof? Is he waiting for me to crack? Uncertainty is pure fuel for dread. In that terrifying void Mestre created, panic doesn't just start, it breathes. It grows roots. It becomes the only thing filling the room. Your own thoughts turn against you, loud and terrifying in the absolute quiet. He hasn't asked a single question, hasn't made a single accusation. And yet you're already unraveling, trapped in a cage built entirely by your own racing mind. The interrogation hasn't even begun, and you're already losing. B. Stage 2. The mirror, but Mestre wasn't just a statue. He was watching, intensely, every microscopic twitch, every beat of sweat, every nervous shift in your seat, every time you swallowed hard or blinked too fast. He saw it all. And then, subtly, almost imperceptibly, he'd begin to mirror you. This was stage 2. If you fidgeted with your fingers, he might slowly, deliberately, lace his own fingers together. If you wiped sweat from your brow, he might let out a soft, almost inaudible sigh, mimicking the release of tension. If your eyes darted nervously, his gaze might briefly flicker away, mirroring that unspoken anxiety. He wasn't mocking you openly. It was subliminal, below the level of conscious thought. The effect is profoundly unnerving. It creates this eerie, unspoken connection. You start to feel like he's not just watching your body. He's inside your nervous system, like he's reading the physical language of your fear, your guilt, your lies, and reflecting it back at you silently. You feel psychologically naked, exposed. Your own body, those little involuntary reactions you can't control, suddenly feels like a traitor, broadcasting your secrets directly to him without you uttering a word. It's not an interrogation. It's a silent dissection where your own physiology becomes the evidence. You feel utterly transparent, and he hasn't said a thing yet. C. Stage 3. The whispered knife, after what feels like an eternity of suffocating silence and that unsettling mirroring. Mestre might finally speak, but don't expect a booming voice or rapid-fire questions. Stage 3 is the whispered knife. When he speaks, it's barely above a murmur, so quiet you have to strain to hear it, and it's never a direct question, never an accusation like, "Did you do it?" Instead, it's a simple, cold observation, a statement of fact delivered with chilling calm. Your hands haven't stopped trembling since I mentioned the fire. Or, you keep glancing at the door. Or, that name made you stop breathing for a second. No anger, no judgment implied, just noting something he sees. But the impact is devastating, because it's always true. He's pointing directly at a physical reaction you couldn't hide, a reaction you probably didn't even fully register until he named it. Suddenly, the fight isn't against him anymore. How do you fight a quiet observation of your own shaking hands? The battle shifts inward. You're not fighting an interrogator. You're fighting your own body, your own uncontrollable reflexes that are screaming your guilt louder than any words could. That quiet statement slices through any remaining defenses. It confirms your deepest fear. He sees everything. He knows. Your body told him. The whispered knife cuts deep precisely because it's so undeniably true, and spoken with such detached, quiet certainty. It makes the silence that follows even heavier, now loaded with the echo of his observation. Stage 4. The confession engine, and then, after hours, sometimes agonizing hours, of this relentless psychological pressure, Stage 4 arrives, the confession engine. This isn't a dramatic climax with shouting or a table-pounding demand for the truth. It's quieter, more inevitable. The weight of the silence, the exposure of the mirroring, the sharp cut of the whispered observations, it all accumulates. The guilt, the paranoia, the sheer exhaustion of trying to hold your composure against nothing but quiet and your own screaming thoughts, it becomes unbearable. The pressure cooker inside the person's mind finally explodes. Not outward, but inward, seeking release. They break, but crucially, it doesn't feel like Mestre broke them. It feels like they broke themselves. They start talking, rambling, offering fragments, trying to explain, to justify, to fill that horrible silence with anything. And then, the confession comes, not because Mestre demanded it, not because he threatened them, but because confessing suddenly seems like the only way to make the crushing internal pressure stop. The only escape from the unbearable weight of their own guilt and fear, amplified 1,000 times by Mestre's silent orchestration. They beg to confess, just to end the torment, and that's Mestre's final, chilling stroke of genius. He makes them feel like confessing was entirely their idea, their own desperate solution. He doesn't take the confession. He creates the conditions where they feel compelled to give it to him, just to find relief from the psychological prison he built with silence. The confession engine runs on the fuel of their own unraveled psyche. So, how does this actually work? How can silence, something so seemingly passive, become such a devastatingly effective weapon? The answer lies deep within the mechanics of the human mind. Psychologists have a term for what Mestre was exploiting: ego depletion. Think of your willpower, your self-control, your ability to focus and maintain a complex deception. Think of all that as a finite resource, like a battery or a muscle. It's not endless. It gets tired. It drains. Every conscious effort you make to suppress a reaction, to control your expression, to fabricate a story, to resist the urge to blurt something out, that takes energy. It burns through that mental fuel. And when that fuel is gone, your defenses crumble. Your ability to lie effectively collapses. Your true feelings, your guilt, your fear, they start leaking out, uncontrollably. This is the brutal genius of Mestre's silence. He wasn't just being quiet. He was creating an environment specifically designed to maximize ego depletion, to drain that mental battery faster than anything else. How? First, the sheer uncertainty. Your brain is a prediction machine. It craves context. It needs to know what's coming next, so it can prepare a response. When Mestre sits there, utterly silent and still, he gives it nothing, zero information. Your brain is forced into overdrive, constantly scanning, constantly guessing, constantly trying to predict the unpredictable. What does he want? What does he know? Why isn't he speaking? What should I do? This constant, frantic internal guessing game is incredibly mentally taxing. It burns energy at an alarming rate. Second, the hypervigilance. In that oppressive silence, every tiny sensation becomes magnified. The sound of your own heartbeat, the itch on your nose, the dryness in your throat, the feel of the chair, and most of all, the awareness of him, watching, always watching. You become hyper-aware of your own body, terrified of giving anything away. You're constantly monitoring yourself. Don't fidget. Don't sweat. Don't look away. Breathe normally. This intense, sustained self-surveillance is exhausting. It's like holding a heavy weight perfectly still. It takes immense, continuous mental effort. It drains the battery relentlessly. Third, the effort to maintain the lie. Lying isn't passive. It's active. Hard work. You have to remember the false story perfectly. You have to suppress the truth, constantly pushing it down. You have to control your facial expressions, your voice, your body language to not reveal what you're hiding. And crucially, you have to do this while under intense psychological pressure and sensory deprivation. The silence and the watching. This complex juggling act devours mental resources. It's like running several demanding computer programs at once on a laptop with a dying battery. Mestre understood this perfectly. He didn't need threats, bright lights, or invasive questions. He just needed stillness. He needed that silence to stretch, and stretch, and stretch. Every second of that quiet, watching void forced your mind to work harder and harder, burning through its reserves of self-control. He was stretching the mind like a rubber band, thinner and thinner, waiting for the inevitable snap. No drama, no violence, just the quiet, inevitable exhaustion of your mental defenses. The stillness itself became the interrogator, grinding your willpower down until there was nothing left to hold the lie together. And here's the crucial scientific insight that Mestre weaponized. Perhaps instinctively, humans will confess faster to end extreme psychological discomfort than they will to avoid punishment. Think about that. Fear of prison, fear of consequences, those can make people dig in, become stubborn, build walls. But the raw, grinding, inescapable discomfort of the kind Mestre created, the feeling of your own mind collapsing under its own weight, the sheer agony of that internal pressure cooker, people will do almost anything to make it stop. Studies on interrogation techniques consistently show this. When faced with relentless psychological pressure, sensory deprivation, or overwhelming uncertainty, subjects often confess simply because they cannot bear the process anymore. The confession becomes the escape hatch, the only way to relieve the unbearable tension. The truth becomes secondary to the desperate need for the discomfort to end. This is the cold, clinical heart of Mestre's method. He wasn't interrogating in the traditional sense. He wasn't wrestling for information. He was a master curator of psychological collapse. He carefully set the stage, the void, the silence, the watching presence, and then he simply waited. He curated the environment, the sensory deprivation, the uncertainty, knowing with chilling certainty what the result would be. He cultivated the conditions where the mind, starved of external stimuli and overloaded by internal pressure, would inevitably turn on. Itself, he didn't extract the truth. He created the precise conditions where the truth would burst out, uncontrollably, like steam from an overpressurized valve, simply because the mind holding it in had finally, utterly exhausted itself. He didn't break down the door. He patiently waited for the walls to crumble from within, weakened by the silent, draining siege he conducted. His weapon wasn't force. It was the profound understanding that the human mind, under the right kind of quiet pressure, will eventually break its own locks. Adlai Mestre's interrogation feels like a relic, a dark artifact from some psychological vault. But here's the uncomfortable truth. It's not just history. It's a stark, unsettling mirror held up to how our minds work right now. This isn't really about one man in a shadowy room decades ago. It's about a fundamental vulnerability wired deep into the human brain. It's about how frighteningly easily our minds can crack under carefully engineered tension. Tension built not with fists or shouts, but with silence, stillness, and uncertainty. Mestre's room was just a laboratory. The experiment? Human fragility under pressure. Think about the world we live in today. It's loud, relentlessly loud. Notifications ping constantly. Screens demand our attention 24/7. News cycles scream. Social media feeds never stop churning. We're drowning in noise and information overload. Our brains are constantly bombarded, constantly reacting, constantly switched on. And in this age of perpetual noise, something unexpected happens. Silence becomes shocking. It becomes powerful, profoundly powerful, because it's so rare, so unfamiliar, so unsettling. This is why Mestre's tactics matter more than ever. Because in a world saturated with sound, the deliberate, calculated use of silence becomes the ultimate power play. It cuts through the noise like a knife. It commands attention precisely because it's so jarringly absent. That uncomfortable pause in a negotiation, that heavy quiet after you've presented an idea in a high-stakes meeting, that sudden withdrawal of communication in a personal relationship, it's not just awkwardness. It's often a calculated tactic, a subtle form of psychological pressure, consciously or unconsciously mimicking the principles Mestre weaponized. Recognize the patterns. In a tense negotiation, imagine someone suddenly going completely silent after you make an offer. Not countering, not arguing, just stopping, looking at you, waiting. The natural human urge? To fill that void, to start talking again, maybe weakening your position, offering concessions just to break the unbearable quiet and get a reaction. That's the void in a boardroom. They haven't said no. They haven't rejected you. They've just created silence, forcing you to do the work, to expose your hand, to reveal your discomfort. Or picture a critical meeting. You're pitching something important. You finish, and instead of feedback, questions, or even polite dismissal, the key decision maker just stares, leans back, says nothing, lets the seconds tick by. You start fidgeting. Your mind races. Did they hate it? Did they zone out? Should I explain more? Did I miss something? That oppressive silence isn't neutral. It's applying pressure. It's the mirror reflecting your own rising anxiety back at you, making you doubt yourself without a single critical word being spoken. It forces you to question your own work, your own confidence, right there in front of them. And in personal dynamics, it's even more insidious. The silent treatment isn't just childish sulking. When used deliberately, it's a brutal form of psychological manipulation, cutting off communication, withdrawing presence, creating that same void Mestre used. The target is left alone with their thoughts, their fears, their guilt, amplified by the crushing silence and the uncertainty of why it's happening. The goal? To make them so desperate for resolution, for any sound to break the quiet, that they'll apologize, beg, accept blame, or change behavior they might not even be responsible for, just to make the discomfort stop. It's the confession engine playing out in a living room, not an interrogation cell. They confess to sins, real or imagined, just to end the silent siege. This is why understanding Mestre's haunting interrogation isn't about learning dark arts. It's not a manual for manipulation. It's a shield. It's about recognizing these subtle, powerful tactics when they're being used around you, perhaps even on you, because psychological warfare isn't confined to spy novels or history books. It happens in corporate offices, during salary talks, intense family discussions, in the dynamics of toxic relationships. It happens whenever someone uses silence, withdrawal, uncertainty, and the weight of expectation to control, to pressure, to destabilize. Knowing how the void works means you can resist the urge to fill it nervously. You can sit in that negotiation silence without crumbling, understanding it's a tactic, not your failing. Recognizing the mirror helps you spot when someone is subtly amplifying your discomfort, making you feel exposed so you can consciously steady yourself, control your reactions, and not let your own body betray you unnecessarily. Seeing the confession engine principle shows you why the silent treatment is so damaging. Helping you understand the urge to capitulate is often just a desperate bid for relief, not an admission of true fault. Defending against this isn't about counter-silence or playing the same game. It's about awareness. It's about naming the tactic in your own mind. This is the void. They're trying to make me uncomfortable, so I talk too much. This is the mirror effect. They want me to feel watched and judged. This silence is meant to make me break. Just that recognition is power. It takes the weapon out of their hands. It allows you to breathe through the discomfort, to refuse to let your own mind become the enemy. It lets you choose your response, rather than being puppeteered by the pressure of quiet. In an age obsessed with noise, remember, silence can be the loudest weapon, but only if you don't recognize it for what it is. Understanding Adlai Mestre's chilling legacy isn't about fear. It's about reclaiming your own psychological space. It's about knowing that the most powerful defense against a weaponized void is simply the quiet understanding of how it works. So when the silence descends, engineered to unsettle you, you can meet it not with panic, but with grounded awareness. You see the strings, and suddenly, the puppet master loses his power. Close your eyes, just for a second. Imagine that room again. Concrete, cold, the flickering bulb, the door locking behind you, and then nothing. Just the echo of your own pulse in your ears. That silence isn't empty space. It's a revelation, a brutal, unforgiving mirror held up to the deepest parts of ourselves we try so hard to hide. Adlai Mestre didn't just conduct interrogations in that quiet. He staged a terrifying demonstration of a fundamental human truth. Sometimes, the loudest confessions, the most profound truths, don't erupt in screams, they surface in the suffocating weight of silence. His haunting technique wasn't about inflicting physical pain. It bypassed the body entirely. It was about shattering something far more delicate, our illusions. The illusion that we are in control of our emotions, our reactions, our secrets. Mestre's void proved how quickly that control evaporates when faced with engineered nothingness. Our minds, craving certainty, spin out of control, revealing the panic beneath the surface. The illusion of secrecy? Obliterated. He showed us how our own bodies, a nervous blink, a trembling hand, a hitched breath, become traitors under the silent gaze of a patient observer. We are never as opaque as we believe, and perhaps the most devastating illusion of all, that we know our own limits, that we understand how much pressure, how much uncertainty, how much internal noise we can withstand before we break. Mestre curated an environment designed to find that exact breaking point, proving our mental fortitude has a finite capacity, silently drained away minute by agonizing minute. So, what do we take from this chilling case study? Not a manual for manipulation, but a vital lesson in awareness. Stay curious about the mechanics of your own mind. Understand its vulnerabilities, its predictable responses to pressure, especially the pressure of the unknown and the unspoken. Recognize that silence isn't neutral. In the wrong hands, or even in the hands of someone who simply understands its power intuitively, it can be a weapon. It can be used to unsettle you in a meeting, to manipulate you in a relationship, to make you doubt yourself in a negotiation. Stay aware. Listen to the spaces between the words. Feel the weight of pauses. Notice when silence is used deliberately to provoke a reaction from you, to make you fill the void with concessions, with apologies, with truths you weren't ready to share. Awareness is your armor. Recognizing the tactic robs it of its power. It allows you to breathe through the discomfort, to hold your center, to refuse to let your own mind become the enemy in the quiet. Adlai Mestre's legacy is a stark reminder etched in stillness. His interrogation room stands as a grim monument to a profound psychological truth. We fear the shout, the threat, the obvious violence. But sometimes, the most dangerous room isn't the one echoing with rage. It's the one where no one speaks at all, where the only sound is the deafening roar of your own unraveling thoughts. Remember that, and guard your mind accordingly.